Hi guys, and welcome to the Percussion Revolver class for the month of May. Okay, this month I should say, we're going to be talking about the most popular of all the sales of Colt revolvers. This was the gun that if you were to encounter someone in the Wild West, anywhere in the Wild West, be it in town, out on the frontier, on a cattle drive, or whatever, the most common gun that you were likely to encounter someone armed with was a pocket revolver. Now this is a 49 pocket revolver. This is a Uberti right there. It's a 31 caliber 5-shot. It outperformed all the other Colts. It's 200 and something thousand of that. And like I've said in other videos, when Colt got the contract to produce the Walker, he immediately started thinking about the civilian market. That's where he had messed up before. He had created the Patterson, which was in several models, including the small pocket, as well as the large. He had also created rifles and shotguns using the system, and it just didn't fly. It was too radical for its time. Everybody wanted to hear about it, but nobody wanted to pony up for it, and militaries were a little bit iffy on the idea of multiple shots. Okay. So by the time that in the early 1850s, Colt had the money and the resources, he brought out the Walker, the Dragoon. First, the transition model, first, second, third Dragoon was the last, and that was right after the Civil War. And that was in the 1850s. But he also brought out the 1849 pocket model. Now there's the model before this that's basically the same gun, except it does not have a loading lever on it, and it has a cupped base pin, because with it you could pop the wedge like that, pull the barrel off, and the base pin right there was cupped so you could use it as a loading device, because the base pin is actually the same size as a rammer on the 31, so you could use it to actually push the balls into the chambers. The intended purpose of this gun was personal defense at very close range, and it did a very good job for that. Now today we consider the guns to be rather anemic, but that's really a misnomer. Mark Hubbs did a very good video where he was shooting water jugs and showed the penetration capability and the speed and the power of these, and that was a real eye-opener. When we shoot but this was small and compact. This was the gun that you carried with you in town in those big pockets of the day. Thus the term pocket gun, pocket revolver. Some people would slide it into the sash. Some people had shoulder holsters even for it. Several people had vests made up. Now John Wesley Hardin became famous for having a vest made up that had a pair of 1860 Armies, one under each armpit like that was inside the vest, and that he could pull out rapidly. Well, there were also gamblers that had these that did the same thing. It was something small, compact, you wouldn't notice it so much. Because I'm not coming here to cause trouble. I'm here to do a friendly game of cards or something like that. But if things go wrong pretty quick, I'm not going to be the victim here. And that was the idea of it. This was a personal defense. And like I said, from modern looking at it, we think, that little bitty ball, that just wouldn't be much stopping power. And a modern comparison that many people compare it to, and I have as well, is think of anything a 22 long rifle will do or a 22 Magnum. This little gun will do up close, because its limitation is its sights, and it's meant to be a short range gun. In later generations, in the mid 1900s, it would have been a snub-nosed 38 that many people carried for self-defense, but it had a little 1 or 2 inch barrel, and it was designed for 0 to 10 yards, and that was it. It was the great exception of having one you could hit any small targets with at any kind of range. My father had a Colt Cobra 38 special that had a like 1.5 inch long barrel on it, and it would stay on a man target at about 7 yards. But at 15 yards, you were hard pressed to hit a 55-gallon barrel with it. The barrel is just so short. You know, it's a personal close range weapon, and that's what this was. Card table distances and things like that. In town, across a 20-foot across room, that was about it. And so these were so hugely popular. One, you got a lot of shots out of a pound of powder. The capacity for the 31 is like 10, 15 grains. And so it gave you a lot of shots per pound. The little mold that came with it, a pound of powder, a pound of lead, excuse me, would make a lot of ball. So with ball, powder, and caps, most did not put any kind of wad in it. They would just simply load it. Now, quite a few would smear bear grease or lard over the top. And this did twofold. One, it helped waterproof to a minor degree moisture from getting in around the ball or conical. Two, it added lubrication to the barrel. Three, it's a biological weapon because that grease would go rancid. You didn't change the grease. So I loaded this gun up in April, and here it is February. And you and I are having a disagreement. And I shoot you, and it just, a good nick, a good through and through hit in an arm. And the bacteria in that unprocessed hog lard, you'll die in a week from horrible infection. There is no penicillin, there is no medicine to treat this. So that little gun was a lot more dangerous than we think of today because we got an ER to go to. They didn't. Colt produced this gun, and like I said, the 48 model, which is often called the Baby Dragoon, didn't have a loading lever. He put the improvement in this for the 49. Now, this came in several barrel lengths. This is the short barrel length, which is like 4.5 inches. They did it in a 5-inch, 5.5, and a 6-inch barrel on it. They were a favorite of law enforcement and stuff like that. The Baltimore police force is one of the first police forces in the country to issue their officers revolvers where you didn't have to bring your own gun. And they were 31 calibers is what they issued because it was considered a self-defense civil gun, so to speak. Where the 51 Navy and definitely the 60 Army and all, those were war weapons. It'd be like giving a, crew-served belt-fed machine gun to your local law enforcement. It seemed to be a little overkill. You're just getting drunk side of the way, stuff like that. Shootings and stuff were the great exception, and this gave great self-defense in the day. And these didn't go away. They produced them all the way up to 1873 when they stopped production of all the percussion models because of the Rolling White patent had expired and they were allowed to make bored-through cartridge guns. And many of these were converted over to 32 short or 32 long centerfire and rimfire cartridges to be used on up. I know as a boy in the late 1960s, I saw a box of Winchester 32 rimfire that was still for sale because there were still a lot of old guys that came in and had old 32 rimfires they were still carrying as personal defense. A hand-me-down gun, probably something like this, that was still serving as a personal defense weapon all the way up to the 1960s, fully 100 years after these guns had been brought out. They were still serving off and on in backwater areas and the poorer people, so etc. But Colt was never stagnant. And so Colt learned with these small guns. All the geometry right here, the lock work, everything is the same as all the Colts. It's just size varies. And we today think of it as multiple models. Well, that's pretty much modern in a collectible way of looking at it. But in Colt's day, there was really just 3. There were all the pocket guns, which had the same grips, the same hammer, same frame, same lock work. Okay? There was the belt models, which was the 1860, which was a scale down from the Dragoon, and the 51 Navy and the 61 Navy. All three of those frames were the same, except the 1860 Army had been relief cut for that bigger cylinder. And the grip was a little different because the 1860 Army had the longer Dragoon grip on it as opposed to the shorter Navy grip. Okay, and then you moved up to the Dragoon frame. So there's three basic frame sizes, and only the 1860 had the extra operation of cutting the water table to make that cylinder clear. But you could put a 51 Navy cylinder and a 51 Navy barrel onto an 1860 most of the time, and there has to be some variations there, but it would fit because of the basic tolerances of the frame. Colt was very much a person that believed in the assembly line, and later on they're going to talk about how Ford invented the assembly line. I'm here to tell you, Sam Colt invented the assembly line. Ford may have done it with cars, but it was Colt that did it with firearms. Prior to Colt, firearms were not truly interchangeable in parts. In the early 1800s, there was, it might have been Eli Whitney or somewhere along in that, they got a contract for a group of muskets that were to be interchangeable in parts. So in the battlefield, you could pick up the battlefield weapons, and if you had a damaged barrel on this one and a damage lock on that one, you could pull the parts together and make functioning guns. And it was close, but not truly 100%. You still had to take out a pocket knife and whittle a little bit to make stuff fit. Colt came up with a system where I could order a hammer for a 49 pocket model, and he could ship it from Connecticut to California, and I could put it into my gun with a minimum of fitting. Normally it'd drop right in. Probably 90% of them would drop right in. There may be some minor little, you got to deepen something just to grunt. But for the most part, it was a drop in. Cylinders, etc. were all built to that kind of tolerance. And that's one of the things that sold these guns, any of the Colts, as a military weapon. And it also sold them as such a small personal defense gun because I could get replacement barrels if I so desired. I've seen little case sets of 49s that had the short barrel, that had the longer barrel, so that I could put on the longer barrel if I wanted to carry it on horseback out in the open for a little bit more range, and I had this shorter barrel I could drop on and push the wedge in to have for carrying in town in a pocket. So it gave it duality. Okay? And in fact, I have seen 2 or 3 of the pocket models in case sets that someone had fitted a rear sight back here to the back of the long barrel to make it a better bunny buster or something like that. And that's not a bad idea. Now, 1860. Colt decides to roll over and really ramp up. And he's bringing out the 1860 Army, the Dragoon power in the belt size. It's got the new fluid barrel that we've talked about in the past, where this square barrel, which had been great in the 1850s, now 10 years later, too many people are making copies. It's too easy for them to mill it out, so he's going to step up. The roll engraving that we've talked about in the past, on the Baby Dragoon, there's an Indian fight scene, much like the fight scene that's on the Walker. Okay? With the 49 pocket model, the scene on the cylinder is a stagecoach hold-up scene. Okay? The 51 Navy has the naval pattern on it, and the 1860 Army has the naval pattern on it. Okay? That roll engrave was designed by Colt to give them a argument to prove, because A, Colt's mass producing. So you are a talented gunsmith living in the backwaters of Missouri, and you want to cash in on this. I can make one of them. I can make castings. I can do all this. That roll engrave costs a whole lot of money, because I've got to make a big cylinder with this in relief where I can press this up against it in a great deal of pressure and turn them and roll them together. And this hard cylinder into this hard drum into this soft cylinder will actually impress it, etch it into that softer metal and make that. That takes a master engraver and a master machinist to make such a device. And you're not going to do that to make 100 or 200 pistols. Colt was going to make thousands. And so that was Colt's kind of little trademark. That was Colt's proof to you this is a real Colt if it had that scene on it. Well, by 1860 it's changed. Now the guys can make these barrels and might even do that. So what has Colt done? He's gone to the fluid stripped barrel, that flowing barrel like the 1860 Army. And so he comes out with two improvements in 1862. Now right here we need to talk about that there's some controversy. Some people say, because you remember the Civil War is in full go right now, that Colt may have brought out on paper officially at event the 1862 Pocket Police and the 1862 Pocket Navy, which we're going to talk about in depth in here just a minute. But it was really 1865, right after the war, that they really ramped up production where they were available out where someone could get it. Someone that wasn't in the know getting a handful. That yes, they were being produced, but, excuse me, they were in small numbers because the war's on. You know, and we're producing 1860 Armies, we're producing 51 Navies, and we're producing 3rd Model Dragoons, and we're producing muskets. So some people say that yes, technically they were debuted in 62, but they really weren't commonly available till 65. Others say that it was only on paper and they really didn't go into production till 65. I'll let the historians argue over that. But the bottom line is, it was the last guns that Colt himself brought out was the pocket guns. He had brought out the 61 Navy, which was, again, that fluid barrel onto the 51 Navy. And now he's done it with the 49 pocket model. But because of what we've learned with the 1860 of how to cut the frame just a little bit and make a bigger diameter cylinder on the front end, what we call a rebated cylinder, and then make a larger diameter barrel internally, we're able to create this. So you had, let me adjust my view so I can see this clearly. There we go. So you had the 49 pocket model, and now we bring out the 62 Pocket Navy. It has a rebated cylinder right here, and this one is 31 caliber and this one is 36 caliber. It takes the same paper cartridge as the 1851 and 61 Navy in military issue, because it has a 20 grain chamber capacity with a ball, and this one has a 15 grain capacity with a ball. So now when you look at this, you can see the cylinder looks like a small 1860 Army. And this was called the Pocket Navy. Why? Well, it kind of looks like a baby Navy, don't it? And yes, it does look like a baby 1851 Navy. And this is Colt being a marketing genius, because even though the 51 Navy was now a 10-year-old plus design, even though we had the 61 Navy, which is the same gun but with just that fluid barrel on it, the 51 Navy was still selling really well. So why not capitalize on it for the guys that were older and I don't want the new one, I like the old one. So he made a Pocket Navy. And why do they call this Pocket Navy? Today, in collectors, we call it that. But what did Colt call this? Pocket revolver of Navy caliber. 36 is Navy caliber. That's why when you look at the 62 Pocket Police, it looks like a scaled down 1860 Army, don't it? Except for that fluted cylinder. Side note, I've always wanted to take the cylinder off of the Pocket Navy and put it onto a Pocket Police and turn it into a small miniature 1860 Army. Well, why didn't they call it the Pocket Army? Army means 44 caliber, and we can't make this 44 caliber. See? So Colt never called it a pocket Navy. Colt called it the pocket revolver of Navy caliber. It's still this gun, just in a bigger caliber. Imagine in modern times, you come out with a, let's say a Ruger GP100 in 38 special, and you've had it out for 10 years, and you improve metallurgy and etc. Now you bring out the GP100 in 357 Magnum. It's the same gun, we just went to a bigger caliber. In Colt's mind, this is the same gun. It's just in Navy caliber. This isn't a totally new gun. It's just the pocket gun, the 49, now in Navy caliber. Okay? Now, I said it would take the paper cartridge that was issued, and it would. The standard issue cartridge was a 18 grain, actually a lot of times it ran like 17 grains, paper cartridge on the small Colt conical bullet. That will go into this because it's got a 20 grain capacity plus the bullet. So it fills it to the top, but it could shoot it. So that means I could take the same ammo that I was issued for my 51 Navy in the military, and I could put it in my pocket pistol. Like having a full size 38 and also having a snub nose 38. That's the mindset. That allowed a great deal of versatility to this gun and power. This little gun generated a lot more power than this gun because of its higher capacity and the fact that it was the 36 bore. So it's about 80%, or actually it might even be closer to the full size 51 Navy in power because it's using the same cartridge, right? It's just a shorter barrel. A compact Navy is what it is. So when people talk about, oh, they're so weak and anemic, not when you're talking about this or the Pocket Police, because you're looking at a gun that's just barely like 5 or 6 grains behind the full size 51 and 61 Navy, which has a capacity that's higher. It can go up to 30 grains into it. But this one can handle 20 grains. So let's do some shooting and I'll show you what it does. Now, side note, in a recent video I did, I talked about this gun and getting it and how it had cap jams, just unbelievable cap jams. The problem was traced to the nipples. And if you purchase one of these, either a Uberti Pocket Navy or a Uberti Pocket Police, plan on changing out the nipples. I put trips into mine and it cured the problem. Now Mark Hubbs of Arizona Bullet Molds makes the little small 31 caliber conical to go into the 49 pocket model as well, and that little bitty conical weighs 80 grains. That's the same weight as the round ball in the 36. So it gives it a little bit more of a heavy hitter to it. I think that these guns are greatly underrated for what their potential is as a self-defense gun in the day. Yes, now today, of course, modern guns, we're not going to talk about them as like, this is the one you got to have for personal defense. No. I shoot a great deal of cap and ball revolvers, you know that. I prefer to carry them for a woods gun because I like to challenge, much like people who do archery or muzzle loading, etc. I like to do it rather than carrying a modern gun. Having said that, I carry modern guns, and I do carry my modern, 9mm or whatever for self-defense. So this gun is a wonderful add-on. And when I got it, I was under the hope that I'd get really small groups because I was thinking, man, this would be just such a great, handy little bunny buster. She hadn't proven to be that yet. I haven't found the load yet. She's more than accurate for what she needs to be. But she is not a one-hole group yet. But we're working on that, and that'll be in future videos. So, let's load up, and we'll see what she can do. Okay. I've just lubed up the bore with some bore butter to make sure my bore is nice and wet. I do not want a dry bore when I'm shooting cap and ball. Turn that up where I can see that a little better. There we go, less glare. Now I've got a measure here that's throwing 17 grains of powder. I'm using 777 powder. little tap to settle it. Take a round ball. Now I take my cast balls as cast. These are 380 from a Lee mold. And then I put them in a bag and I coat them with liquid Alox. Give them a little bit of lubricant. And drop the ball in the target. Put it underneath. Hook it and send it home. Just like that. No wad, no lubricant on top. Balls are good tight fit, so I don't have to worry about it. My nipples are good tight fits with these caps, so I do not have to worry about them coming loose and give me a chain fire. Cuts a nice little ring off with every one. What big old Would-Be, he is looking for him a place, ain't he? And finally, since I'm out here on the range, I am going to load it all five, because it's a 5-shot. And put it hammer down on the pin, because I'm only walking a few feet to the target. Where I'm going to be carrying this in the field, I would load 4. Hammer down on an empty. Okay. Rain coming in. I hear the wind getting up. Now one thing you're going to notice with these smaller pocket guns, it's a little tighter to try to cap it. It's a little tighter to try to do everything with it because of the way that everything's a little bit smaller. So you're just going to have to figure out what you do. If you go too far in your rotation, it clicks over and it's hard to do it. So I always bring it up almost, and then I use my thumb right there, see, to guide it to keep it in the center of the thing. So when I push past, it go click. Okay. Now I put hammer down on the pin. Put my earplugs on, grab my glasses, and let's go down and shoot. Okay, you're at the 10-yard line. I'm going to step up to the 7-yard line. You're going to shoot at this target right up here that's the snake striking old Jack's leg. And let's see if I can save Jack and make sure he doesn't get snake bit. We shall try. Well, I think old Jack owes me some scotch. Let's go take a look. One hit, one nick, one through the head, one there, one there. So I got 3 hits on the target, 2 flyers. And this is 777 powder. and I have not worked it out yet, but that's not horrible. But that's a hand-sized pattern at 7 yards. Were that in self-defense, anything on that paper would count now, wouldn't it? So for a gun that's designed for self-defense, I was at 7 yards. I was able to hit the snake 3 out of 5 tries. Not bad. Would wads help? I believe they would. I believe wads between it would. Wads act as a filter, and they also make for consistent pressure, so that it's not trying to burp around the side of the ball as much. Better gasket. So I may go to a wad with this load and see, but we shall see. Okay, same thing. 10 yards out. I put the camera down. I walked up to 7. Forgot to hit play. But here is the grouping: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they're all covered by a hand right there. This gun is brand new. This is probably the 20th or 30th round ever fired through it. I don't start getting serious about dialing in accuracy till it's got somewhere between 50 to 100 rounds in it, because your rifling is very sharp and it's got a dull down being what's called fire lap. Your forcing cone is sharp. It's got to be fire lap, and that's just simply balls going down range, rounds going down range, and it kind of smooths out the barrel, and therefore my accuracy will get better. Once it's kind of stabilized, I have seen guns that out of the box shot hard left, and 100 rounds later they're shooting hard right. It's because the rifling has now kind of lapped in it. Actually was going to be shooting right, but you went and corrected hard right because of that first group that came out of it. You went and filed the sights and everything to throw it to the right. Now it's off the board to the right, and you ain't got room to bring it back. So I always wait for a brand new gun to stabilize. I don't get serious about my accuracy work until somewhere between 50 and 100 rounds. But this is showing me A, it's grouping of a sort. B, I think it needs wads. I think it needs a sealing wad, and I'm going to try doing just the simple cardboard wads out of wax cardboard, like drink boxes, stuff like that I punch out to use. Utilize it. Put it under it, because it acts like a gasket to help hold those hot gases from going around the projectile, or what's called bumping up. The impact, yes, but the heat is so intense it can soften the lead a little bit right on the back end. Well, that thin card absorbs that and makes a better seal all the way around. I'm seeing vertical stringing and horizontal stringing, and that normally indicates gas loss. And so I'm wanting to seal it up and try to make it more uniform. Now, let's do a detailed strip of this gun to see how the internals work and what you need to know about how to dial it in. Okay guys, now we're going to do a detailed breakdown of the Pocket Navy and show you. Now it's like any other Colt, but we're going to talk about little things along the way of ways you can improve it. Now this one came out of the box. This is a Uberti. Now I haven't seen anybody else. I don't think Pieta makes one of these now. I think that they're only available through Uberti. But this is a very nice gun. I like the fact that it's clean. It doesn't have a lot of marks all over it. They put the important stuff like Uberti made and all that up underneath the rammer, so it's out of sight, out of mind. You just got your standard serial numbers and proof marks right there, and of course proof marks you got to have on the cylinder, but it leaves it clean, and I really like that. I don't like one that's just stamped all over, black powder on it. They just ruined it to me. It really did. The collectors, when they were bringing them out, they were big on mark all over it. We want to know it's a fake. There's no way. Well, here's the thing. All replicas are left-handed twist, and all originals are right-handed twist, so a look down the barrel will tell you automatically if it's a replica. So that's not, I can understand when it first came out they were a little bit nervous about that and why. But nowadays it's not that big a deal. Now, to take the wedge out, I like I said, take a clothespin and just take, it's a nice hardwood drift, set it up there and put it onto the wedge itself, give it a little bump, pop right out. That fits that opening just perfect. Okay. Alrighty. Now, let us start with the cylinder, and let's talk about it for just a second. It takes the standard Uberti nipples, and I've had to change out mine because the opening in the standard nipple as issue was way too big. I went to a Tresco nipple, which I like better. It has a much smaller opening in it, smaller flash hole, and so I don't get blowback. When I got the gun originally, when I would fire even a 10 grain charge, it would blow the hammer back and put the cap all the way down to here at the base of it. So it's not that the spring wasn't holding it, it was just there was so much blowback coming back it would just lift the hammer. And so I changed it, and that's cured the problem. Okay, now with just a standard nipple wrench, I like to, every time when I get done, you know, I'm doing a cleaning or whatever, I like to break the nipples loose on it. Just put it in there, set it down, and just break them loose and then retighten them. Now I put anti-seize, and I've had several people ask where you get anti-seize. Any auto parts house will have it, and it's simply the stuff that the grease that you're supposed to put on spark plugs to keep them from seizing to the engine block. Same idea we're doing here to keep these nipples from seizing up to the cylinder and allow us to remove them easier. But I've also found these Trescos, to me, do a better job at not binding up, because two different metals, where the stock nipple and the cylinder will rust together. The Tresco is actually an alloy and therefore doesn't rust the same, and so it doesn't adhere it to it. Okay, standard cleaning you would do, etc. This one does have the pins right there, and that's for the hammer to sit on for safety. It's a 5-shot. So there's very little we do with this other than the standard cleaning. Okay, now the barrel. The barrel has one screw that holds the rammer in place and one screw that holds the pivot point for the loading rammer. And then you have a screw here that holds the wedge in place. Okay, and on this Uberti it's captured. You can actually hang it by that, and that's very good. That's what the original design was. This would come out and keep you from losing this out in the field, like in combat, where this would get eventually wore loose and would fall out of the gun on firing, and then you'd be without a gun. That captures it and keeps it in place, and you're supposed to take that out. Take the wedge and take a file and just break any sharp edge on it. Now, I'm not talking about rounding it. Don't round it. But make sure that these edges of the wedge are not razor sharp. Just take a file and just break that just a little, because we don't want those to form a peened edge that bites into the base band and makes it very hard to retract it. Okay? But to take that off, all you got to do is take the one screw off, and the loading lever will come right out, completely out. I recommend you take it out at least, you know, every other time. One of these little auto parts magnetic bowls are great for small parts. Now, the rammer has a slot in it, as you can see. This allows it, when it pivots, for this to pivot up and down. I have seen people accidentally put this in incorrectly, so let me show you something. Almost. You should take these loose as well, every so often, make sure they're not rusting in place. Now, as you see when it comes out, see the way the slot is? It's this to the top, and the slot goes down. If you put it in that way with the slot up, it wants to bind trying to ram. It's upside down. So the long goes to the bottom. Notice it's got the notch is kind of offset, so you want the long end down, just like that. And I've even seen those come from the factory installed upside down before. So now this one you can run down and snug it up, because it's hanging on the bearing of it. It's not pinching it, and therefore keep that snug. To take it out of the gun, give it a good cleaning, and this is color cased, it's hardened. Clean out the cone where the rammer is. That allows you to make sure that when you go to ram your round ball or ram your conicals in, that it will get crud up in there and will actually distort the ball, so you want that cleaned out. Add a little bit of grease to the surface of this, put it back in. I always just push it through with my finger and then give it a half turn, then I go to the screwdriver. Notice how I'm taking my thumb, and I use the thumb as a guide. That way I can come up here and get onto that screw and turn it and not have it slip off and scar up my gun. I let the weight, so to speak, go downhill onto my thumb. Okay. Now, on to the important stuff. As I've stated before, how to properly break down a colt. Hammer all the way down. Start with the base screw down here at the base of the grip. Loosen it up about 3 turns, maybe 4. Then go to these 2 screws on top. The back grip frame is actually under tension. If you do not remove this screw first, lighten that up to release that pressure, it wears out these screws up here going in and out because it's under torque, so to speak. Once you screw them out a little bit, because the head of these screws is actually fitting into an orifice, once they screw out, it makes it much easier to take these grips off, and you don't wear out these screws. I'm going to take the screw, and I'm going to put it, I take my little round tray and I kind of divide it into thirds so I don't cross these up. Now this is the same grip screw that goes in the back of the trigger guard, but and then the base screw down here, using my finger as a guide like you see there. Now put all those 3 screws together right there, and off comes the grips. Now notice there's no finish down in there. Notice that whenever we remove these, and these are good tight grips, I like that, but here's the snug. I don't want to crack them trying to take them off, but I want to get them off. There we go. Alright. Now you see this way there was some finish applied to that side, but there's none down in there, and that's a very thin piece of wood. So whenever I refinish these, and I will refinish these in the future, I've got to be careful to make sure that I get it all the way in there and I seal it, because if that's not sealed, moisture can get in there and cause the grip to swell, and that's going to cause it to crack through here and cause your grips not to fit. So you want to completely seal this, and a lot of times in the factory these are done real quickly by being sprayed, and they don't get done down in here. Always take your grips and seal them up. If you don't want to do anything else, get some regular old car wax like you wax your car with, and put in here with a Q-tip. Seal it up good, because that will keep moisture out. Now I'm going to go to the big the screw that holds the mainspring in. We're going to turn it and take about 3 turns with it. That's going to take the bulk of the pressure off. I'm then going to press down with my thumb and move it to the side like that. And see, now there's no tension. Now I can remove that screw and take off my mainspring without having it under any tension. Okay. Now I put that big screw back. Now I go to the front of the trigger guard, put my thumb up there, guide it onto it, take that screw loose. It's going to come over here in the plate, so I know what group goes what. Go to the back one. Come on. The Pocket Navy is actually a pocket gun, same as the 49. They just, as I said in the video, they increased the caliber of it, but other than that, it's still a pocket 49. So these are small trigger guards, small screws, you know, everything's compact and just tinier. So you got to be careful, because you don't have as much meat as you have like in a full size one. And see, like that, the actual size of the opening here is so close to the screw size that screw wants to stay captured. I can barely push it down my thumb. So I can leave it in there, or I can actually guide it out by putting pressure on my finger and unscrewing it, but it's kind of captured because it's kind of swedged in there. Okay. Now we come to the big screw on the trigger and bolt spring. Put your thumb up there as a guide. Notice what position that screw's in, because that's what you want to put it back to. If you've got the proper amount of tension and everything, you can over tighten this screw down, because that way, so as the spring wears over time, you could tighten it up a little bit if it got too loose. That was part of Colt's design. But you see which way it's pointed. I see that as pointing at the 1 o'clock, like 1:30 position. Okay. Now take that screw out. And out comes the spring. Put that screw right there. Now I'm going to wipe down and clean that spring a little bit. It's a good idea to oil these. Add a little oil in here. Also, that's the teeny tiny little trigger spring. Take your finger and do like that, go on all the edges. Is there a sharp wire edge? There shouldn't be on these springs. And if there's a sharp edge on the edge, or where the spring, they punch through the hole to make the screw go through, that can cause a break. So you take a file or something and lightly round it off. It should be just like a piece of butter. If it's got a sharp wire edge, knock that edge off, because it can crack the spring down the line. Okay, now we're looking at the bottom. And it says underneath the trigger guard right here, A Uberti, Italy, and the big number right there, and then you got your proof marks and the serial number. So it's well marked, but kudos to Uberti, they put it up under the trigger guard. So it's marked legally, but it doesn't mar the finish, in my opinion. Like I said, it doesn't take away from the beauty of it. Now we're going to take off the trigger spring, the trigger screw, excuse me. And the trigger screw and the bolt screw is interchangeable. They're the same design. Out comes the trigger. Now we take a moment to go ahead and clean the trigger. And like you see, I'm getting crud off of it. When you fire the gun, there is a fine mist of fouling that comes down into the action. And you will foul up the action eventually. So if you take her out and you shoot 40 or 50 rounds through it at the shooting range, make sure you clean it and you totally break it down and clean it under here. It's not a big deal if I'm shooting it day by day and I'm only shooting a cylinder here or a cylinder there. But what can happen is this fouling builds up, and then you let it sit for a while and it kind of glues in place, kind of rusts in place, stiffens up. And you not knowing this, you come in here and you grab it and you pull back on that hammer, and half the components is kind of stuck in place, and suddenly you got a problem. You got a broke part. Alright, now taking the very tip, going down in there and just lift up the bolt gently like that. Now pull the bolt out. These parts are good about rust resistance, but still it makes sense just to do this. Now of course I will oil all of this down on reassembly. And now we got the frame. Now the opening where the bolt goes through and comes to this side, make sure that's not got a sharp burr. Those are very common. So get a little needle file and take it off, because that can cause all kinds of dragging issues and breaking parts. Now we're going to take out the hammer, and the problem with this gun, the hand spring, and you're going to see why in just a second. Pull out that, and now we're going to tip the hammer back and slide it straight down. Now you see that hand spring, how far back it stands? It makes it difficult to insert it into the gun because it drags on the frame. Now let me clean this up a little bit. Right quick. Here on the back of the hammer, you've got the little roller. Make sure it rolls easily. Okay. I have seen those come from the factory being too tight and wouldn't roll, and it causes all kinds of action problems. You think the gun doesn't have good ignition, it's because of the fact the hammer is not wanting to roll, it's wanting to slide, so to speak, and it doesn't have a nice snappy hammer fall. Always clean. Right here in the front of the hammer you have the cam. It's that little thing right there. That's what lifts up on the bolt right there, and it's the teeter-totter that kicks it up so it tips down and lets the cylinder go. So it's acting like a teeter-totter. It hooks here and goes, it lifts up so it goes down, and the spring pushes it up. That's how it's working. Okay. Make sure you clean the face of the hammer, and you clean the notches. Those notches right there are where the actual business takes place. The big one, the one up here closest to the top of the hammer, that one is the half cock, and that little bitty narrow little teeny tiny notch is your full cock notch right there. Make sure you ain't got a bunch of crud packed in there, because it can make a difference. Okay. Now we'll clean off the hand. The hand normally suffers the worst. Excuse me. Because there's enough blowback in there from the nipples firing off the caps that it blows down that channel, and so you get quite a bit of fouling down here. Okay. Now that's the basic disassembly. Now let's lubricate everything and then put it back together. The lubrication, I'm going to be using rim oil down here inside the action. Now I want you to notice something else here. Look at this hammer. See that streak right there? That shiny right there? That's telling me that there's a burr up here on this frame somewhere. I can feel it right there. And that burr is actually hooking the hammer and slowing it down. So while I got all of it out of here, now's the time to grab a small file and fix it. So let me get my file out and let me fix that, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, now that I've taken my little needle file set right here, and I've just collected little bitty small needle files over the years, and tiny hones, and these diamond hones that you can pick up from gunsmithing supplies. And that's what I use to deburr, clean up, etc. any kind of cap and ball revolver. Alright, now, reassembly. We're going to start with a hammer. I'll put a little bit of oil on all the important parts of it. Make sure you get a little bit of oil on that roller back there. Right there on the side. Give it a good coating. Okay. Now my hand that I have deburred, I'm going to coat on the outside of it real good. Put it into that little slot. Now, you've got to guide it into this. You can see that raceway right there. That can be a problem because it may or may not want to go down it. I had trouble with this the first time I did it because it didn't want to compress and go down that slot. You just got to wiggle it and wiggle it and wiggle it to get it in there. Sometimes it's fiddly when you're doing these things. Okay, got it in there then. Don't panic, don't break nothing, just do it nice and easy. Now, I've got all my fingers, I've already oiled that, so now I'm going to put the mainspring screw in and run her up using my thumb as a guide. Snug it up. Now gently. Okay, we're good. Now I'm going to take and put a drop of Oil on all important parts. Make sure they're thoroughly coated. We're going to put the ears of the bolt, and we're going to push them down in the slot, and then gently push it so that the bolt faces up through the opening in the frame. We're going to take one of the action screws, one of the screws that does the trigger and bolt, coming from the correct side. We're going to sear it up, make sure it butts in, put our thumb up there as a guide, and run her down. Nice and snug. Now the trigger, goes into where the hammer fits it. Put a little bit of oil on the bearing surface. Run her through. Just like that. Fix thumb there's a guide. And give her a seat. Whoop. You hear how it slipped off? Didn't put my thumb in the right place. And that trigger, that screwdriver tip jumping off, slapping, it gouges up your frame. Alright, now to make sure everything is working correctly, put your finger here and your thumb here and hold the trigger that way and gently pull back. Now we're wanting to hang up. Why? That's because the bolt's in the wrong place. There. Okay, now the bolt is all the way up. We put our thumb there, and since that hand wants to stick up and bind up, I'm going to slide the cylinder on it. So I'm holding the trigger forward and I pull back. It should click into half cock and it clicks into full cock. Okay, we're good. Now let it off, hammer down, push the bolt into place. Now, as I spoke of, that trigger spring does have a burr, and I had not addressed that yet. And on the bottom side of it I can feel, so I want to address that right now. See, I'm holding it on my fingertip and just draw the flat file across it. Okay, good. A wire edge is what begins the tear that ends up being the break. Okay, so we want to avoid any kind of wire edge on any spring. Now we seat by putting the long tab onto the front of the trigger, and we put it down in there, making sure it's up on top of the trigger. We take that big headed screw, put it in there, and start it. Now don't be in a hurry, go gentle. When you feel it snug up, remember how that screw slot was pointing over here at the 2 o'clock position? That's where I just snugged it up. Now let's see, I'll have to slide that back on it, but I don't want to over torque it, so I'm going to rotate it down, see if it does it. Click half cock, full cock. Alright, it did. Now I pull the trigger down. I bring it back to full cock again, and my cylinder is locked. That tells me that screw is in proper tension. So that little bitty spring is not overworked. It's holding just enough tension to do its job. I can always increase it if I need to later on. Okay, now remember that one that's stuck in the frame here? Oh, and by the way, see how much blowback is coming by in the frame area? Always give that a little wipe down, put a drop of oil on it, dissolve it a little bit, get it out of there. I like to oil a brass frame on the inside. I'd rather it have a little oily mist that picks up instead of it being dry and hard and cakey. Makes it easier to clean down the line. And I'm going to line it up, Put my finger up there to guide it, and I'll put that first trigger screw in, making sure I don't torque it to the side or anything. Alright, don't go all the way. Take the little bitty screw, a bit of oil on the finger, put it in. Don't torque them down, just bring them up snug, and then put it in place. Now this one, I'll snug it up. I go back to this one, I snug it up, and I come back to this one, and I snug it up. Now to do the mainspring, I take that big screw out back there. Right here on the tip, I want to make sure I got grease or something, and I do, to keep it a little oiled. Put a little bit of oil on it, wipe down the full length of the spring. I ain't got any burr on the punch hole, so I'm good. So I'm going to put it up there. Sometimes this gets fiddly. Line up the hole. Finger start my big screw down just a couple of turns. Now I come up here and I take my thumb and I push down on the spring and bring it underneath the hammer. Just like that. There's a little race in your spring. Make sure that little roller is sitting in it. Now I go and tighten it up. Now, before going anywhere else, let's check. Full cock, it's locked. Half cock, it turns. Okay, we're good. Okay, now we put the put your grips in by putting the base in first, like that. Slide it back, and then gently pull with your fingers and push with your thumbs until it fits. Okay. Set in the bottom, come up. Now what I like to do, push it down, hear it click, till it's just sitting there. And I take that base screw and I drop it down in there. Give it like 3 turns. Now I come up here to my top strap screws. Again, oily fingers. Put it right there. And you see if you can get it started. Now sometimes you got to push down on it, sometimes you got to lift up. It's just how it is. Alright, that don't want to start. Let's start over here on the left. This 49 frame is a lot more. Dang it. Now you saw that. You saw that now, didn't you? Now I'm going to go hunting that screw. Alright, let's see what we can do with this one. Alright, pull it out a little bit. Drop it in right there. Okay, that in a bit. Now, let me go find that screw. A little less irritating than I expected it to be. That does happen from time to time. I'm betting you. Okay, this is one of those things. Loosen that up. I'm wondering if I got my base screw mixed up with my side screw. Yep, I bet I did. Alright, let's see. Because in the 49 it's a slightly different screw there. It look a lot alike. Yep, that's what it was. The top of the grip strap screws are actually smaller in diameter, but we'll go in there. But they look a lot alike, so it's easy to get them confused. There. Alright, now we run the grip screws up snug. Then we go back to the base screw. And that should pull it. There's a gap right there that it pulls up tight. Now that it's together, now we go back to all the screws and give them a little touch just to make sure they're good and in there. Boy, there we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. And good. And good. Now, slide the hammer on, slide the cylinder on. Always put a little bit of oil or grease on your base pin. Your wedge, I should say. If I was going to shoot this, I would grease my base pin up with some natural thing like Crisco or something like that so that I can utilize it and not worry about it binding up. I put my finger over the back side so that I can feel that wedge come through. As soon as it just gets flush, I'm done. Alright, now we cock it slow. It locked up. Cock it fast. It locked up. We're done. She's back together. And that is a full disassembly of the 49 Pocket Model / Pocket Navy. So, in conclusion, the 62 Pocket Navy and also the Pocket Police, which I've had one in the past, is a good self-defense gun for the day. Were I back in the day, I would load this thing up with a heavy conical. I love the conicals by Kato Ojama because those conicals are designed for blunt force trauma, that flat nose, and would provide better shock value, we'll call it, in real life upon shooting something with it. So if I was going to carry this as personal protection for against dogs, hogs, wild animals up close and personal, that would be a way to go with it. It would produce. The round ball is nothing to sneeze at, but I still prefer the round ball for just day-to-day carry and day-to-day target work, saving the conical for when I really need that extra hit. Okay, I'm trying to get this thing to punch above its weight. The Pocket line of pistols, the 31s and the 36, were very, very successful by Colt and could not have been anemic or ineffective, or they would not have sold as well as they did and not held on as long as they did. Well after the percussion era, many of these guns were converted over to rimfire or centerfire cartridge guns and still served as a personal protection gun, and has been shown by Mark Hubbs in the 31s. The actual 31 loaded with a conical outperforms the cartridges that were created afterwards, like the 32 short and 32 long, to replace it. That the percussion was stronger than it was. And so they served well in their day. Now, we've talked about loading it. We've talked about shooting it. We've talked about the job of it. We've showed how to break it down. What my future for this gun is, I'm going to work on trying it out with wads. I'm going to try it out with various powder load, Power Decks, 3F, 4F. I'm going to find out what it likes and what I can group with it the best. Ideally, I want to be able to put all shots on a playing card at 7 yards with it. If I can do that, I have no problem carrying it as personal protection against snakes and small things that would be a problem to me. Okay, so carrying it on a backpack trip or whatever, or on a otherwise leisurely camp out, sure, light and handy, and it does as good as a belt for that job. And so that's the future of it for me. Hope you've enjoyed this video, guys. Please leave any questions or comments below and I'll answer them as fast as I can. Till next time, guys, I'm Blackie, wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.